Okay, so today we are going to be drawing a realistic Easter rabbit using a grey lead pencil and a black pencil. I'm going to start off by drawing myself a grid. I find grids really easy to start your portraits with, and I find a 3 by 3 inch, not centimeters, inch cube is a really good starting point. So 1.5 inches is each little cube square. I'm going to draw 4 of these. This helps me get the size and the shape of the head before I start adding in all the detail. So I start off with the outline of my head and this sort of flattened front. The nose isn't as pointy as what you think it is. I curve around the sort of cheek, snout, muzzle area. And then I also flatten off the back of the head. This is where the ears join onto. Underneath the chin, it falls down and back around quite quickly, and it goes quite sharply, the jawline, back up to where the ears attach. Now, as I'm doing my outline, don't press too hard with your grey lead pencil. It will make really deep creases that are going to be hard to rub out later. So as I refine the outline of my rabbit, I'm going to be rubbing out those guide markers. Now in the corner here, just left of the center, I'm going to be drawing my eye. Now it's not a round or an oval shape, it's more of an almond shape. So it's a little bit like an oval with pointed ends, and this is on a diagonal. Rabbit's eyes are quite angled. They're not straight up and down as, say, a goat's or a sheep's eyes would be. The nose is a little bit like a Y, and I'm adding a little bit of an extra curve on that far edge of my nose to make it look more rounded. Now I'm starting on my ears at the top here. Rabbit's ears are quite rounded at the top, and they come down quite flat, quite straight in the top middle section. And I'm going to be separating this ear into sort of two parts, the inner and the outer part of the ear. So the inner side of the ear is quite transparent and it's more skin based, and the outside has the rabbit's fur or hair. Be sure the bottom lines here need to overlap to make it look like that you've actually got a hollow of the ear. Otherwise, it keeps your painting or picture looking quite flat. So make sure that bottom groove, you really deepen the inside with grey lead and darken the inside edge. Okay, now that I've done the basic outline for my forward-facing ear, I'm going to be adding my back or further away sort of ear. Now for this second ear, you don't need to add that inside detail because you will only be seeing the fur side, the back side of the back ear. You won't be seeing the inside. So don't try to copy what you've done on the front ear, otherwise it won't look realistic. It'll look quite cartoonish because it's not the angle you're actually viewing the ear. I go back in and I add little dark edges there just to define each ear. Okay, I'm doing a little bit of an arched back here for the rabbit. It's just to sort of get structure of where we're going to be moving down to. I'm not going to do the whole rabbit today. It's going to take us too long. And already I'm using time lapse, so this takes quite a bit of time. It took me almost an hour to complete this drawing. However, if you're pausing it and if you're taking your time, it might take you 2 to 3 hours. This is me doing a very, very rough sketch. Usually if I'm doing a animal portrait, it'll take me 3 to 6 hours. That's adding in all the detail. But we're just doing a very basic realistic bunny, and that still takes quite a bit of time. Now I find around most rabbits, you have sort of these lighter areas around their eyes, around their cheek, around their nose, and around their ears that are slightly lighter. So I like to give myself little guide mark lines there around the eye. Now it's really important, I'm adding a little highlight area That's keeping it white and not adding in the black. It makes your eye look three-dimensional, especially if you're adding a darker shade or making your pencil much, much darker directly beside that light, that little reflection light. This helps it look like a bit of a marble and gives it shape. It's not as flat. So the further away from that light source or reflection mark, you can actually gradually get lighter. And later I will be using a black pencil to go back in and add even more depth. Okay, so we are working on the nose. I'm adding a little bit of, as you see, those guide marks around the snout, around the little schnoz. And I'm going to start by adding in just more detail and more depth into that really crease of the front of the bunny's nose. I'm going to do a very short haired rabbit today, so I'm using fine little brush strokes, and these, try not to go up and down and leave your pencil on the paper. It'll create zigzag lines instead of straight single lines, so you actually want to lift your pencil up after each of your lines. Now, your lines are quite short on this rabbit. It will have longer hair on its ears and on its body. And as you work your way down the snout and down towards the nose, rabbit's hair is often much, much shorter. On most animals, it tapers off and gets quite a bit shorter right before the nose. So make sure you're going from a medium size length of hair to a very short length of hair near the nose and a much longer length of hair near the ears and on the body. Now, when I like to do my and draw my hair or my fur on animals, it's really important to have a medium sharpened pencil. If your pencil is too sharp, it'll make scratches on your paper, and it's very, very hard to then rub out any lines that you want to change later. And if it's too light, it looks very flat and it won't add that body. Now, as I said, this is a very basic, realistic drawing of a rabbit today. However, I would usually use a base color, a very light base color fur, often a light brown, and then go over and add more detail with a dark brown before adding detail with my black. So there's a few different layers, and when you're using a grey lead pencil, it is often much harder to add that depth in your drawing. Now, as I'm working my way up and around the head, I'm following the sort of outline guidelines and the shape of the eye. I'm not doing up and down motions or horizontal or diagonal. The fur actually follows around the eye, around the top of the head, down below the eye, and across the cheek. So, very important to have a look at the direction of your fur or your feathers or whichever animal you're drawing. It's really important to look at the direction of where things are sitting and how they're laying. Because if we're drawing fur on a rabbit and we're just drawing vertical lines, so up and down lines, it won't look like a 3D or three-dimensional rabbit. It will look like a very, very basic drawing. So it's very important. Now I'm going to full forward a little bit, and you'll feel free to stop it whenever you'd like. I'm going to full forward a little bit because now I'm just adding a lot more of that bunny texture. Okay, I've added in most of that fur. Now it's time to work on the ear. The front little V curve that you can see I'm working on, it's really important that is the darkest point on your ear. I also find, because that's the inner side of the ear, that it's got lots of shade on it. The inside of the ear is more like a skin tone, so don't press too hard, otherwise it will look scratchy and furry, and it's actually quite smooth. I end up using my finger just to give it a little bit of a smooth out, like that of charcoal, a little bit of a smudge so it doesn't show the lines as much. The very top of the ear on the outside, often on hares and rabbits, are much darker as well. They've got that sort of dark edge to the top of their ear. I'm adding in sort of horizontal lines here that come out from the inside of the ear and out to the outside. So I am doing very straight horizontal lines right near that edge line of the ear. Now that I've finished one side of that ear, I'm actually working my way down the front of the ear, and it's very similar. I'm using those horizontal lines very softly to actually mesh and smooth into the inside of the ear. If your lines are too dark here, they actually won't sit well on your ear. They'll look like they're hovering or floating, or the bunny has something caught in its ear, like cobwebs or spider webs. It won't look like the actual part of the ear. Make sure the inside is much softer than the outside rim. The outside should be the darkest point on this front side of the ear. Now, it's important when we start working on the far side ear that that very front side of the first ear, it actually needs to be super dark there. This adds contrast and makes the back ear stand out and look further away. If you don't add in the shading at the top of the ear and right in that bottom V, it won't look like it's part of the same rabbit. It will look like it's sort of floating, or it's got some sort of weird hat sitting on its head. So it's really important that you add the shading, the darkened tips of the ears, and inside that V point, it's quite dark there. So most of the other side of the rabbit's ear is the same length fur. You don't have to work on that fur too long. Often when ears and things are further away, they become out of focus in photographs. So to make it look realistic, the ear closest to you needs to be the most defined, and the ear furthest away needs to have a little bit of subtlety to it. So don't add too much detail to that rear ear. It will actually bring it forward, and you want it to sit further back. So don't work too much on it, and just add those sort of basic lines. Now I'm going to add a lot more depth to my rabbit's side of the face and where the creases of the ear or where the ear might pivot, so where the ear might turn on a rabbit. There's often extra skin and folds and creases, and I'm going to go through my rabbit and just add a little bit more depth and detail to a few areas like the chin, the nose, the ear, the corner of the jaw and the ears. Okay, so it's almost time to add in our whiskers. Now, whiskers, think of them as really thick hairs. Don't add them in too much. And they also follow the same direction as the fur. So if the fur is heading diagonal or down towards the bottom of the rabbit, that's the same direction the whiskers are going to be pointing out. If the hairs are facing upwards, the whiskers are going to be pointing up towards the back of the rabbit's head. And on the opposite side of the rabbit, so the other cheek, it's much easier to see because you've got a nice white, clean, clear background. So it's much, much easier. But remember and have a good think about which direction the whiskers will be facing on the opposite cheek. It's opposite to the cheek you can see. Don't try and draw them going the same way. It won't look quite right. Okay, now that I've added a lot more detail to the outside of my rabbit, I'm going to focus now more on the eye. Now it is a bit hard because my hand is blocking a lot of the detail, but as I move away, I'm adding a lot more depth to the lid closest to where that reflection dot is. And I've got a little eraser that I tend to use just to clean up those areas. And I create that nice eye socket. So bring the outside of the eye down slightly, so it looks like the rabbit's got a little bit of an eyelash line on the top of your rabbit's eye, to create that marbled effect of the eye. Remember, the darkest point on the eye needs to be behind or around where you've put the reflection little white patch. And as you move closer to the nose of the rabbit, it needs to gradually get lighter. Now I'm really happy with the eye for now, so I'm going to add a little bit more texture to the back and the body of the rabbit. I'm adding in longer strokes now, so my hairs are going to be slightly longer, not too much longer, but just slightly longer than the head, similar to that of the ears, or even a little bit longer to the ears. I'm also going over the body very, very gradually and very quickly with just sort of like a base grey. So I'm doing a very light gradient grey over most of the body. Now, as I said today, I'm not doing the feet, I'm not doing the paws, I'm not doing the tail. I just want to focus on a head with a little part of the body to look a little bit like a portrait. And if I was doing this for someone, I'd add a ring of flowers around the outside to frame it. I don't often like doing the whole body because I don't enjoy doing things like the limbs or the arms. I like to focus on the face as the main feature. And as I said earlier, with photographs, I want to have one focal point, say the face, and then the rest of the body tends to be a little bit more faded, a little less focused. So your eyes will naturally focus on the sharpest point of that picture, which for this one, this drawing, I want to be the eye, the ear, and the nose. So I want that sort of diagonal area of the face to be the focal point. So the body, I don't want to put too much detail because it's not my focus. Okay, so I'm just about finished with the grey lead, and it's time for me to now collect my ivory black pencil. It's a little bit blunt, so I'm going to sharpen it because as I said, it's a bit hard to read. There it is, ivory black, and I'm using Derwent pencils, but you can use any black pencil. I like to keep my pencils nice and sharp so I can add really clean features for, say, the whiskers and the hair. Now remember, at the top of my ears are going to be slightly tinged darker because hares and rabbits often have darker tips on the ends of the ears. I'm going to add more detail into my eye because I'd like that eye to really stand out and be my focal point. So I'm putting lots of effort into my eye, and I'm going to be adding a lot more of the shaded areas. So the nostrils, the lines near the ears, and I'm going to add more detail, not too much detail, but a little bit of detail on the inside of the ear and the outside of the ear with my black pencil. It just adds that second dimension of depth. Okay, and I'm going to fast forward the rest of my video to show you what the end product looks like. Okay, so I've added a lot of my detail. I'm on my final little stretch now, just refining some bits and pieces on my drawing. And that's my final product. Be sure that you always add your little signature. You can add your date. Here's a little close-up of my realistic Easter bunny. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.